My mother threw my gift on the floor. It wasn't just the hand-knitted baby blanket she rejected. It was me. Every sacrifice I'd ever made, every late night, every quiet hope I'd harbored, she crushed it all under the heel of her designer shoe, in front of everyone at my sister's baby shower. Have you ever been made to feel so small that you almost disappear? That was the day I disappeared on purpose. But they didn't know I was about to come back, as the one thing they could never ignore. Their lifeline. The air in my parents' house was always a little too cold, no matter the season. It wasn't the air conditioning, which hummed at a perfect, climate-controlled 72 degrees year-round. It was an emotional chill, a lack of warmth that no thermostat could fix. Today, for my sister Paige's baby shower, the chill was masked by an explosion of pastel pink and white. Balloons strained toward the vaulted ceilings, and ribbons cascaded from every available surface. It was a picture-perfect scene, curated for social media, designed to scream wealth and impeccable taste. I felt like a smudge on a pristine photograph the moment I walked through the door. My dress was a simple, dark blue linen. It was clean, it fit me well, and it was the nicest thing I owned. But under my mother's gaze, it might as well have been sackcloth. Meredith Holloway didn't greet me with a hug. She greeted me with an appraisal. Her eyes, sharp and critical, scanned me from my sensible flats to the messy bun I'd wrestled my hair into. Her lips thinned into a familiar line of disapproval. "Sloane," she said, her voice as crisp as a starched collar. "You came. It wasn't a welcome, it was an accusation." My sister Paige was the sun around which our family had always orbited. Today, she was practically glowing, enthroned on a white wicker chair, her perfectly round belly draped in silk. She was surrounded by a court of her friends, women with identical salon-perfect hair and expensive handbags. They were laughing at something one of them had said, their laughter tinkling like ice in crystal glasses. Paige saw me over their shoulders, gave a small, dismissive wave, and immediately turned back to her friends. The message was clear. You are not part of this inner circle. You are an obligation. I found a spot near the back, by the lavish food spread. I recognized the caterer, a woman named Mrs. Gable from other family events. She was a consummate professional, directing her staff with quiet efficiency. She had a calm, observant face, and for a moment her eyes met mine. She offered a small, polite smile before turning to rearrange a tray of miniature quiche. At least someone had acknowledged my existence without judgment. I watched as the gift-opening ceremony began. It was less a celebration of new life and more a public display of wealth. Gift after gift was unwrapped to gasps and coos of admiration. A silver rattle from Tiffany's, a cashmere onesie, a stroller that probably cost more than my car. With each unwrapping, my own small square gift, wrapped in simple brown paper and tied with twine, felt heavier and more foolish in my lap. My father, Richard, stood by the fireplace, a glass of champagne in his hand that he hadn't touched. He looked tired. There were lines of stress around his eyes that hadn't been there last Christmas. He was a man held hostage by his wife's ambitions and his own fear of failing to meet them. He caught my eye and gave a weak, watery smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. He was present, but he wasn't really here. He had checked out long ago. Finally, my mother announced, "And this one is from Sloane." Her tone made it sound like a punchline. Paige's friends quieted down, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. My brother-in-law, Chad, a man whose smarm could be weaponized, leaned forward with a predatory grin. I walked up and handed the gift to Paige. My hands were clammy. I made it," I stammered, my voice barely a whisper. Paige took it from me, her manicured fingers holding it as if it were contaminated. She tore the paper off with careless haste. Inside lay the baby blanket. It was a soft, creamy white, knitted in a complex cable-knit pattern that had taken me nearly 100 hours to perfect. I had used the finest merino wool I could find, spending money I didn't really have because I wanted to give my future niece or nephew something made with love, something real. Paige held it up with 2 fingers. The silence in the room was deafening. "Oh," she said, her voice dripping with disappointment. "You made it." And then my mother laughed. It wasn't a gentle chuckle, It was a sharp, ugly bark of a laugh that cut through the room. "Sloane, for heaven's sake," she boomed, her voice projecting to every corner of the sun-drenched living room. Everyone was watching now. The registry was at Tiffany's, not a craft store. What are people going to think? We can't have them thinking we're destitute. My face burned hot with shame. I felt dizzy, like the room was tilting. Chad snickered loudly, a smug, satisfied sound. "Well, at least we know what Sloane's budget is," he said to the man next to him, who chuckled uncomfortably. I looked at my father. He was staring intently at a painting on the wall, his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. He wouldn't meet my eyes. He wouldn't defend me. He never did. His silence was its own form of betrayal, a quiet endorsement of my mother's cruelty. The final, crushing blow came a moment later. My mother, with a look of pure disgust, walked over to Paige. She snatched the blanket from my sister's hands. She didn't fold it. She didn't even look at it. She walked over to a side table laden with discarded gift bags and wrapping paper, and she tossed it on top of the heap. She threw it away. She threw away a month of my life, a piece of my heart, as if it were trash. I saw Mrs. Gable pause in her work, a silver tray of champagne flutes held steady in her hands. Her professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second, and I saw a flicker of something in her eyes, pity, maybe, or just shock. Then it was gone, and she was once again the invisible orchestrator of the party. I couldn't breathe. The air was too thick with their judgment, their laughter, their disdain. I turned without a word. No one tried to stop me. I walked out of the living room, through the grand foyer, and out the heavy oak door into the blinding sunlight. The tears I had been desperately holding back finally broke free, blurring the perfect manicured lawn into a watery green smear. I fumbled for my car keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the lock. As I drove away, I didn't look back. In my rearview mirror, the house looked like a perfect, beautiful lie. The shame was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest. But underneath it, something else was starting to form. Something cold, hard and sharp. It was resolve. That was the last time. That was the last time they would ever make me feel so small. The drive back to my apartment felt like crossing into another country. I left behind the world of manicured lawns, vaulted ceilings, and casual cruelty, and returned to my own reality. The city grew denser, the buildings grittier. My apartment was on the third floor of a walk-up with peeling paint in the hallway and a permanent smell of stale cooking oil. Inside, the contrast was a physical blow. The air was hot and stuffy, a stark difference from the refrigerated perfection of my parents' home. My living room was also my bedroom and my office. A worn-out couch doubled as my bed, and a wobbly particle board desk was crammed into one corner, piled high with sketches and invoices from freelance graphic design gigs. I dropped my keys on the counter of the tiny kitchenette. The silence of the small space was a relief after the noise of the party, but it was a heavy silence, filled with the echoes of my mother's laughter and Paige's dismissive voice. I looked around at my life, a stack of bills on the counter, a single wilting plant on the windowsill, the faint but persistent flicker of the overhead fluorescent light. This was it. This was the life of the artistic failure of the Holloway family. For dinner, I put a kettle on the stove and pulled a packet of instant noodles from the cupboard. As I waited for the water to boil, the humiliation from the baby shower replayed in my mind on a loop. My mother's sharp, barking laugh, Chad's smug snicker, the pitying looks from Paige's friends, and my father's resolute silence, his refusal to even look at me. That one hurt the most. In a quiet, aching way, his cowardice was a confirmation. You are not worth defending. The knot of shame in my stomach was so tight it felt like a physical object. For years they had mocked my choices. They called my passion for art a phase. They insisted my freelance career was just a hobby, something to do until I found a real job or a wealthy husband to take care of me. They saw my lack of material wealth not as a temporary struggle, but as a deep personal failing, a stain on the family's pristine reputation. And for years, a part of me had believed them. I had let their definition of success become the standard by which I judged myself, and I had always come up short. But tonight, something was different. As I sat at my wobbly desk, stirring the bland noodles in their styrofoam cup, the shame began to curdle into something else. It was anger. A cold, clear, clarifying anger. They had laughed at my gift because it was handmade, because it came from my time and my skill, not from my wallet. They had devalued the one thing I was truly proud of, my creativity. I looked at my desk, at the tools of my failure. My laptop, my drawing tablet, my software. I wasn't a failure. I was a designer. I understood aesthetics. I understood user experience. I knew how to build something from nothing. I was organized, meticulous, and thanks to my freelance career, I knew how to manage projects and meet deadlines. My family saw my skills as worthless. What if they were wrong? I pushed the noodles aside, the bland taste suddenly unbearable. I opened my laptop. The familiar glow of the screen felt like a beacon in the dim apartment. My fingers flew across the keyboard, not with the usual rhythm of client work, but with a new, frantic energy. An idea, born from the ashes of my humiliation, was taking shape. What was the one thing my family understood? Expensive, impressive gifts. What was the one thing they lacked? Genuine thought, personal touch. They outsourced sentiment to brand names. They bought affection from high-end department stores. What if I could bridge that gap? What if I could create a service that delivered the feeling of a perfect, thoughtful, and personal gift, but with the polish and prestige of a luxury brand? A high-end curated gift box service. Not just a random assortment of items thrown into a box. It would be an entire experience. Each box would be built around a theme, meticulously designed, with every single item sourced for its quality and uniqueness. It would be beautiful. It would be personal. The unboxing itself would be part of the gift. I would call it Keepsake Co. Because it wouldn't just be about things, it would be about creating memories. For the rest of the night, I didn't sleep. Fueled by cheap coffee and a burning sense of purpose, I worked. I drafted a business plan, my mind racing with logistics, marketing strategies, and financial projections. I designed a logo, simple, elegant, timeless. I sketched out the website, mapping the user journey from the landing page to the checkout. I created spreadsheets for potential suppliers, for cost analysis, for launch timelines. The sun was starting to rise, casting a pale gray light into my apartment, by the time I finally leaned back in my chair. My eyes were burning, my back ached, but I felt more alive than I had in years. This wasn't just a hobby anymore. This wasn't a little project. This was my declaration of independence. This was my escape plan. This was the weapon I would use to build a life so successful, so undeniable, that their laughter would be nothing but a faint, pathetic echo in the distance. They had thrown my gift in the trash. I was about to build an empire from the scraps. The next 6 months were a brutal, isolating grind. My life shrank until it consisted of only two things: my tiny apartment and the relentless pursuit of building Keepsake Co. from the ground up. Every single dollar I earned from my dwindling freelance design jobs, money that should have gone to rent, to groceries, to fixing the leak under my sink, was funneled directly into the business. My world became a landscape of sacrifice. I stopped going out. Invitations from the one or two friends I still had were met with vague excuses. I couldn't afford a $10 movie ticket, let alone a $20 dinner. My social life evaporated, replaced by the solitary glow of my laptop screen. My wardrobe consisted of the same 3 t-shirts and 2 pairs of jeans, washed in the sink to save money on laundry. I didn't buy new clothes, new shoes, or anything that wasn't an absolute necessity for survival. My diet was a monotonous rotation of the cheapest food I could find: rice and beans, pasta with no sauce, oatmeal for breakfast, lunch, and sometimes dinner. I drank endless pots of the cheapest, most bitter coffee I could buy, not for pleasure but for fuel. I was perpetually tired, a deep, bone-weary exhaustion that sleep never seemed to cure. There were dark circles under my eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. I was running on fumes, on sheer willpower, and a burning desire to prove them all wrong. My days were a blur of self-education. I became a student of the internet. I enrolled in free online courses on digital marketing, learning the intricacies of SEO, pay-per-click advertising, and social media engagement. I watched hours of tutorials on YouTube, teaching myself the basics of supply chain management, business accounting, and corporate law. My browser history was a testament to my obsession: how to register an LLC, best e-commerce platforms, negotiating with wholesale suppliers, how to package fragile items for shipping. I was a one-woman show: the CEO, the marketing department, the accountant, and the intern, all rolled into one. The loneliness was the hardest part. There was no one to celebrate small victories with, no one to complain to when things went wrong. My family, of course, knew nothing. I hadn't spoken to them since the day of the baby shower. My mother had left one frosty voicemail a week later, not to apologize, but to scold me for my dramatic exit. I deleted it without listening to the end. The silence from them was a relief, but it also deepened my isolation. I was completely on my own, building my secret empire in the shadows. There was a moment, about 3 months in, when I almost gave up. It was the lowest point. My main web server, hosted on a budget plan I could barely afford, crashed. It didn't just go down, it corrupted everything. The website I had spent hundreds of hours designing, the product database I had painstakingly built, the custom code I had written, it was all gone. For a full 24 hours, I was staring at a blank error screen. Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I couldn't breathe. My heart hammered against my ribs. It felt like the universe was confirming what my family had always believed: I was a failure. I was destined to fail. I spent 2 straight days and nights on the phone with apathetic tech support agents in another country, my voice cracking with exhaustion and desperation. They were no help. They told me the backups had also been corrupted and that the data was likely lost forever. I remember sitting on the floor of my apartment at 3 in the morning, surrounded by empty coffee cups, tears of pure frustration streaming down my face. This was it. It was over. All that sacrifice, for nothing. But then, through the fog of despair, that cold, hard resolve I'd felt driving away from the baby shower began to resurface. I was not going to let a server crash defeat me. I had built it once, and I would build it again. Using my graphic design skills and the scattered backup files I had saved on my own hard drive, I started to piece it all back together. I redesigned pages from memory. I manually re-entered product information from my spreadsheets. I rewrote code line by line, my fingers aching, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. It was a Herculean task, a brutal, soul-crushing process. But 48 sleepless hours later, the website was back online. It was better, faster, and more secure than before. I had faced my first major disaster and survived. I had stared into the abyss of failure and refused to fall. That crisis, as terrible as it was, forged something new in me. It burned away the last of my self-doubt and replaced it with a core of tempered steel. I wasn't just building a company anymore. I was building myself. Keepsake Co. had a beautiful, functional website. I had a solid business plan and a meticulously curated list of potential products. What I didn't have was money. The last of my freelance income and personal savings had been poured into the website, rebuild and securing the LLC, to buy inventory, to launch a marketing campaign, to actually turn this from a digital dream into a physical reality. I needed capital. I needed an investor. The thought was terrifying. It meant putting myself and my idea out there, opening myself up to rejection from a stranger. But the alternative, letting my dream die on the vine, was unthinkable. I spent weeks researching potential investors in the city. I didn't want to go to a big, soulless venture capital firm. I needed someone who would understand the vision, the passion behind the brand. My search led me to one name, whispered with a kind of mythic reverence in local business circles: Julian Croft. Julian Croft was a legend. He had built a massive tech company from his garage in the 90s, only to be pushed out by his co-founder and best friend, just before it went public, and made his friend a billionaire. After that, he had become a recluse, a ghost who managed his remaining fortune by making very selective, very private investments in startups. He was known for being brilliant, ruthless, and brutally honest. He was exactly the kind of person who would either see the potential in Keepsake Co. or laugh me out of the room. There would be no in-between. Getting a meeting with him was a challenge in itself. He didn't have a public email address or a phone number. I had to go through a lawyer whose name I found in an old business filing. After a week of persistent, polite emails, I got a response. One sentence: Mr. Croft will see you on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Do not be late. His office was on the top floor of a stark, modern skyscraper downtown. There was no name on the door, just a number. The reception area was empty except for a single chair and a severe-looking woman who checked my name on a list and told me to wait. The silence was intimidating. When the door to his office finally opened, I walked into a room that was as stark and intimidating as his reputation. It was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. But the room itself was almost empty. There was a large black desk, 2 chairs, and nothing else. No art on the walls, no personal trinkets, no clutter. It was the office of a man who had stripped his life down to the essentials. Julian Croft sat behind the desk. He was older than I expected, maybe in his late 60s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to see right through me. He didn't stand. He didn't smile. He just gestured to the chair opposite him. "You have 15 minutes, he said, his voice a low gravel. My heart was pounding. I took a deep breath and launched into my pitch. I walked him through the business plan, the market research, the financial projections. I showed him the website, the branding, the mock-ups of the curated boxes. I spoke with as much confidence as I could muster, trying to channel the steely resolve I'd forged during the server crash. He listened without a word, his face completely unreadable. His silence was more unnerving than any interruption would have been. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. He was quiet for a long, agonizing moment. "Your projections are naive," he said finally, his voice flat. "Your market is saturated with cheap competitors. Your business model has 1,000 points of failure." My heart sank into my stomach. This was it, the rejection I had feared. I felt my face flush with a familiar shame. I started to gather my papers, my hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Croft," I mumbled, my voice weak. "I didn't say no," he said, his sharp eyes fixed on me. I froze, my hand hovering over my laptop. He leaned forward. "I have one question for you, Ms. Holloway. Why are you doing this? And don't give me some business school nonsense about market disruption. I want the truth." I looked at him, at this powerful, intimidating man, and for some reason, I decided not to lie. I didn't give him the polished, professional answer. I gave him the raw, painful truth. "Because," I said, my voice quiet but steady, "I need to build something that no one can ever take away from me. I need to build something so successful that the people who called me a failure have to watch me win." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of understanding. He was quiet for another moment, and then he told me a story. He told me about his first company, the software he had poured his life into. He told me about his best friend, his partner, the man he had trusted completely. He described the day that friend had called an emergency board meeting, used a legal loophole to vote him out of his own company, and then sold it 6 months later for a fortune, erasing Julian's name from its history. "He saw me as a stepping stone," Julian said, his voice cold and hard with the memory of a decades-old betrayal. "He underestimated me, and then he erased me." He looked at me, and for the first time, I felt like he was truly seeing me. "You have the fire of someone who's been underestimated. I recognize it. It's a powerful fuel." He named a number. It was more money than I had ever imagined seeing in my life. "I'll give you the seed money," he said, "but understand this. This is not a charity. I expect a 10 times return on my investment, and you will not, under any circumstances, let anyone push you around. Not your competitors, not your suppliers, and especially not your family. Is that clear?" I nodded, speechless. "Yes," I finally managed to say. "Perfectly clear." He gave a curt nod. Good, now get out of here, you have an empire to build. With Julian Croft's investment, Keepsake Co. transformed from a dream on a laptop screen into a real tangible business. The wire transfer hitting my new corporate bank account was a surreal moment. For the first time, I had resources. I had a safety net. But I also had the crushing weight of expectation. Julian's belief in me was both a gift and a burden. I was determined not to let him down. The first thing I did was move out of my apartment, not into a nicer place for myself, but into a small, windowless workshop space in an industrial park on the outskirts of the city. It was ugly, and smelled faintly of dust and machine oil, but it was mine. I assembled metal shelving units, bought packing tables, and organized my first real shipment of inventory. The boxes of beautiful, high-quality products I had only seen in online catalogs were now here, in my hands. High-end scented candles, small-batch artisanal chocolates, hand-poured soaps, elegant stationery. It felt like Christmas. The official launch was quiet. There were no fireworks, no big party. I just flipped the switch on the website and sent out an email to the small list of subscribers I had managed to gather. Then I waited. The silence was deafening. For the first few days, nothing happened. A single order trickled in from a friend of a friend, then another. I treated each one like it was the most important order in the world. I packed every box myself. I was meticulous. I folded the tissue paper just so. I arranged the items in a way that would create the most beautiful reveal when the box was opened. And for every single order, I wrote a personalized handwritten note on thick, creamy cardstock. Dear Sarah, I would write, I hope this brings a little bit of joy to your day. Thank you for supporting my small business. Warmly, Sloan. It was a detail my mother would have scoffed at, but I knew it mattered. It was the personal touch, the human connection that would set Keepsake Co. apart. The grind continued, but it was a different kind of grind now. It was filled with purpose. I would arrive at the workshop before sunrise and leave long after sunset. I was the packer, the shipper, the customer service representative, and the marketing director. My hands were dry and cracked from handling cardboard boxes, but I had never felt more fulfilled. The turning point came about a month after the launch. I received an order with a note in the gift message section that said, "Just for me. I saw your boxes on a blog and decided I deserved a treat." I was confused. I hadn't sent any boxes to bloggers. I did a quick search online and found it. A small but influential lifestyle blogger, one with a small but fiercely loyal following, had ordered a box for herself and had just posted an unboxing video. My heart pounded as I clicked the play button. The blogger, a warm, friendly woman, opened the box on camera. She gasped. "Oh wow," she said, her voice filled with genuine delight. "You guys, look at this. The packaging is stunning." She went through each item, raving about the quality, the scent of the candle, the taste of the chocolate, but the thing she focused on the most was the handwritten note. "And look," she said, holding it up to the camera, "a real, handwritten note from the owner. Sloan, you just don't get this kind of personal touch anymore. This company is something special." The effect was immediate and overwhelming. My phone started buzzing with notifications from my e-commerce app. 1 order, 5 orders, 20 orders. By the end of the day, I had more orders than I had gotten in the entire previous month. The blogger's followers were not just buying, they were sharing, they were posting, they were spreading the word. The next few weeks were a chaotic blur. I could no longer handle everything myself. I hired my first employee, a bright, energetic college student named Maria who lived nearby. The first time I saw her expertly packing a box, treating it with the same care that I did, I almost cried. Seeing someone else believe in my vision, someone else invested in its success, was an incredible, validating feeling. We set up a large whiteboard in the workshop. On it, I tracked our growth. First 100 orders, then 500. Then, one incredible Tuesday, we packed our 1,000th order. Maria and I celebrated with a cheap pizza, eating it on top of a stack of shipping boxes. We were reinvesting every single penny back into the business, expanding our product lines, upgrading our shipping materials, and refining our process. I was still exhausted. I was still living on a shoestring budget, paying myself a tiny salary just big enough to cover my rent and instant noodles. But for the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of genuine, unadulterated hope. I was building something, something real, something that was mine, and it was working. As Keepsake Co. grew, it started to attract attention. We were featured in a few more blogs, then a local magazine did a small piece on up-and-coming e-commerce businesses. The name Keepsake Co. was starting to generate a quiet buzz, and with that buzz came a different kind of attention. One afternoon, I received an email with the subject line, Acquisition Inquiry. It was from a senior executive at a company called Global Gift Solutions, a massive publicly traded conglomerate that specialized in the kind of generic, mass-produced gift baskets you see in airport terminals and drugstore catalogs. They were, in every sense, the corporate antithesis of everything I was trying to build. They were also the exact kind of company my mother admired, big, powerful, and profitable. They wanted a meeting. My first instinct was to delete the email, but Julian's voice echoed in my head. Don't let anyone push you around. Taking the meeting felt like a power move, a way to show them I wasn't intimidated. I agreed to meet them at their corporate headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that screamed money. The boardroom was a caricature of corporate excess. A long, polished mahogany table, expensive leather chairs, and a stunning view of the city, even better than Julian's. I sat across from three executives in identical gray suits. They oozed a slick, practiced confidence that made my skin crawl. They told me they were impressed with my brand penetration and my customer loyalty metrics. They used a lot of jargon, but the message was simple: they wanted to buy me. Then, they made their offer. The lead executive slid a folder across the table. I opened it. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper with a number on it. I stared at it, my breath catching in my throat. It was a life-changing amount of money. It was never work another day in your life money. It was enough to buy a beautiful house, a new car, to travel the world, to be free from the constant gnawing anxiety about bills and rent that had been my companion for years. It was the easy way out, the ultimate validation, in a language my family would understand. I could just picture my mother's face if I told her. The shock, the begrudging respect, my daughter, the one who sold her little company for millions. The temptation was a physical thing, a sweet, seductive pull. Then, the lead executive started talking about their synergistic vision for the brand. Of course, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand, we would streamline the supply chain. We'd replace your artisanal suppliers with our own cost-effective, high-volume vendors. We'd absorb the Keepsake Co. brand into our Luxe line. And your small team, well, we have our own fulfillment centers. We wouldn't have a need for them. He said it so casually. He was talking about dismantling my entire world. Firing Maria. Replacing the unique, high-quality products I had spent months sourcing with their cheap, mass-produced junk. He was talking about gutting my company, stripping it of its soul, and wearing its skin as a costume. My mind was reeling. I asked for a moment to think and stepped out into the hallway. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone and called Julian. I laid out the situation, my voice trembling slightly as I told him the number they had offered. Julian was quiet on the other end of the line. He didn't tell me what to do. He didn't give me advice. He just asked me a simple question. "Sloane," he said, his voice calm and steady, "let me ask you something. Did you go through all of that hell, the loneliness, the instant noodles, the server crash, just to become a footnote in their quarterly report? Or did you do it to build an empire?" His words cut through the fog of temptation like a laser. An empire. That's what this was about. It wasn't about a quick payday. It wasn't about proving a point to my mother with a number on a bank statement. It was about building something lasting, something with integrity, something that was authentically mine. I took a deep breath. The choice was suddenly devastatingly clear. I walked back into that boardroom. The three executives looked up at me, their faces expectant, smug. They thought they had me. I looked the lead executive straight in the eye. "Thank you for the offer," I said, my voice strong and even, "but Keepsake Co. is not for sale." The shock on their faces was immensely satisfying. They stammered. They tried to renegotiate, but my mind was made up. I stood up, shook their hands, and walked out of that gleaming tower with my head held high. It was the hardest decision I had ever made, turning my back on a fortune. But as I walked out into the sunshine, I felt light. I had been tested, and I hadn't buckled. I had chosen my integrity, my brand, and my people over the easy money. And in doing so, I had solidified not just who I was as a business owner, but who I was as a person. I was building an empire, and it was not for sale. It was inevitable that my family would eventually find out about Keepsake Coed. It happened in the way things always did in my family, through the grapevine of gossip. One of my mother's friends saw the article in the local magazine and mentioned it to her. My mother in turn mentioned my little online shop to Paige during one of their daily phone calls. I knew the moment they looked it up, the vibe shifted. The polite, dismissive silence I had grown used to was replaced by something more active, more venomous. I could feel their jealousy radiating from across the city. To them, my success was an affront. It didn't fit the narrative they had written for me. I was supposed to be the struggling artist, the cautionary tale, the failure who made their own success stories shine brighter. My thriving business was a crack in the foundation of their worldview. The attack, when it came, was swift and vicious, and it had my brother-in-law Chad's fingerprints all over it. Chad worked in corporate strategy, and he was good at it. He knew how to identify a competitor's weaknesses and exploit them. He treated my small company like a corporate target. It started overnight. I woke up one morning to a flood of notifications. Our Google rating had plummeted from a 4.9 to a 2.3. A wave of one-star reviews had been posted within a few hours of each other, all from anonymous accounts with no purchase history. They were filled with lies. My order never arrived, one said. Items were broken and the company refused to help, said another. This is a scam, do not buy. My heart seized with that familiar cold dread, the same feeling I'd had at the baby shower. I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was them. This was their doing. It didn't stop there. Over the next few days, our social media pages were spammed with hateful comments from dozens of newly created fake profiles. Terrible customer service, cheap products from China, this company is a fraud. Then, the official complaints started rolling in. Anonymous, unsubstantiated claims were filed with the Better Business Bureau. An email arrived from our payment processor, notifying us that our account was under review due to an unusually high number of chargeback claims, all of them fraudulent. The impact was devastating. Our sales, which had been growing steadily, dropped by 70% in 1 week. The trust I had worked so hard to build was being systematically dismantled. I felt helpless, like I was being attacked by a ghost army. I was back in that place of shame and panic, the world crumbling around me. But this time, I wasn't alone. I called Julian, my voice shaking with a mixture of anger and fear. I explained what was happening. He was silent for a moment, and then he said, "Good. You've gotten powerful enough that they see you as a threat. This is a rite of passage. Now we fight back." His calm, strategic response was the anchor I needed. He immediately connected me with his personal legal team, a group of sharp, no-nonsense lawyers who specialized in corporate defamation. They drafted cease and desist letters. They started the process of subpoenaing the IP addresses of the fake reviewers. They showed me how to formally contest the fraudulent chargebacks. For the first time, I had a shield. But Julian knew that a legal defense wasn't enough. The real battle was for the hearts and minds of my customers. "You have to get in front of this, Sloan," he told me. "You have to be transparent." The thought of putting my face out there, of making myself the public face of the company, was terrifying. I had hidden behind the brand for so long, but Julian was right. Hiding would look like an admission of guilt. So I did the scariest thing I could imagine. I set up my phone in the workshop, stood in front of the whiteboard that tracked our growth, and I recorded a video. I didn't write a script. I just spoke from the heart. "Hi everyone," I started, my voice a little shaky. "My name is Sloan, and I'm the founder of Keepsake Co. I started this company in my tiny apartment with a dream of creating something beautiful and personal. And for the past year, thanks to your incredible support, that dream has been coming true. I took a deep breath. Recently, my company has come under a coordinated attack. We've been flooded with fake reviews, false complaints, and hateful comments, all designed to hurt our reputation and destroy the business I've poured my life into. I didn't name my family. I didn't need to. I just laid out the facts, showing screenshots of the fake reviews, the identical phrasing, the timestamps all clustered together. I explained the steps we were taking legally, but then I looked directly into the camera. I can't fight the lies on my own, I said, my voice thick with emotion. But I can tell you the truth. Every box you receive is packed right here, in this room, with care and with love. Every supplier I work with is a small business owner, just like me. This company is my life, and I'm asking for your help. I posted the video on all our social media channels and emailed it to our customer list. Then I held my breath. The response was overwhelming. It was a tidal wave of support. The comments section filled up not with hate, but with love. "We believe you, Sloan. I knew those reviews were fake, just placed another order to show my support." Customers who had been silent before started posting their own unboxing videos and 5-star reviews, talking about the quality of the products and the personal touch they loved. They became my army, my defenders. The attack backfired spectacularly. The flood of genuine positive reviews drowned out the fakes. Our sales didn't just recover, they exploded. The story of the small business fighting back against anonymous online bullies resonated with people. We gained thousands of new followers and customers who were drawn in by our story and our authenticity. Chad's clumsy, brutal attack had been meant to destroy me. Instead, he had handed me my biggest marketing win to date. He had tried to remind me that I was a loser, a nobody he could crush without a thought. But he had failed to realize I wasn't that person anymore. I was the founder and CEO of a resilient, beloved brand with a loyal community at its back. He had picked a fight, and for the first time in my life, I had won. 2 years passed. 2 years of relentless work, strategic growth, and quiet success. Keepsake Coma was no longer a small startup operating out of a dusty workshop. We had moved into a proper headquarters, a bright, airy loft space downtown with a dozen employees. We had been featured in national publications. We had launched a successful corporate gifting division. We were, by any objective measure, a multi-million-dollar company, a quiet powerhouse in the e-commerce world. And through it all, I had remained a ghost. My name was not on the About Us page. Julian Croft was listed as the public-facing chairman of the board. All official documents and press releases came from the anonymous Keepsake Co. Corporation. It was a deliberate strategy Julian and I had designed. It protected my privacy, but more importantly, it kept my family in the dark about the true scale of my success. To them, I still just had my little online shop. They had no idea they were witnessing the rise of an empire. My anonymity was my greatest strategic advantage. I lived a comfortable but modest life. I had a nice apartment, but not a lavish one. I drove a reliable car, not a luxury sports car. I had poured almost every dollar of profit back into the company, fueling its growth. The wealth was on paper, a number in a corporate account, not a lifestyle designed to impress anyone. My focus was singular: build the empire. One Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was my Aunt Carol, my mother's sister. She was a notorious gossip, but she had a soft spot for me. She sounded frantic, her voice a hushed, conspiratorial whisper. "Sloan, honey, are you sitting down? I shouldn't be telling you this. Your mother would kill me. But you need to know." I sat down. "What is it, Aunt Carol?" "It's your father," she said, her voice cracking. "He's lost everything. Everything." She spilled the whole story in a torrent of tearful words. For the past year, my father, Richard, desperate to keep up with my mother's insatiable appetite for a luxurious lifestyle, had been making a series of increasingly risky investments. He had been trying to hit a home run, to find that one big score that would solve all their problems. Instead, he had struck out, catastrophically. He had lost not only their savings but a significant amount of borrowed money. and to cover those initial losses, he had done the unthinkable. He had secretly taken out a massive second mortgage on the family home, the house my mother worshipped, the house that was the symbol of her entire identity. They were months behind on the payments. The bank was no longer sending polite letters. They were sending foreclosure notices. The auction date was set. They were on the verge of losing everything, and they had been hiding it from everyone, putting on a brave face, terrified of the social ruin, the public humiliation. As Aunt Carol cried on the other end of the line, a strange, cold calm washed over me. It wasn't glee, it wasn't pity, it was a feeling of absolute, chilling clarity. This was it, the moment the universe had been building towards for 2 years. The pieces on the chessboard were all in place. I thanked my aunt for telling me, promised I wouldn't say a word, and hung up the phone. I sat in the silence of my apartment for a long time, the city lights twinkling outside my window. The house where I had been made to feel so small, so worthless. The house where my mother had thrown my gift, and my heart, into the trash. It was about to be taken from them. But not by the bank. The next morning, I didn't go into the office. I went to see my wealth manager, a discreet silver-haired man who managed the keepsake corporate accounts. I walked into his quiet, wood-paneled office and laid out my request. It was simple. I wanted to buy my parents' mortgage debt. All of it. The original mortgage and the secret second one. He looked at me over the top of his glasses, his expression unreadable. "This is a highly unusual request, Sloane." "I am aware," I said, my voice steady, "but it is not personal. It is a business transaction. The property is a distressed asset. I want to acquire it." I was clear about the terms. The entire transaction had to be anonymous. My name was not to appear anywhere. The purchase was to be made by a shell corporation, a subsidiary of the main Keepsake Co. holding company. The bank would be dealing with a faceless entity, and my parents would be told only that their debt had been purchased by a private investment firm. It took a few weeks of complex legal and financial maneuvering, but it was done. The wire transfer was sent. With a few strokes of a pen and a quiet click of a mouse, I became the owner of my parents' debt. I owned their home, the foundation of their entire world, the symbol of their social standing, the stage upon which they had performed their lives, now belonged to me. They were living in my house, and they had absolutely no idea. A few weeks before Christmas, an embossed cream-colored envelope arrived in my mailbox. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. It was an invitation. "Meredith and Richard Holloway request the pleasure of your company for their annual Christmas Eve dinner." For a moment, I considered throwing it away. Why would I go back there? Why would I subject myself to their world again? I had moved on. I had won. I didn't need their approval. But as I looked at the invitation, I realized this wasn't about them anymore. This was for me. It was about closing a chapter. It wasn't about revenge. It was about resolution. I needed to go back to the scene of the crime, not as the victim, but as the owner of the building. I called Julian and told him about the invitation and what I had done. He was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Sloane?" he asked, his voice laced with concern. "This is a dangerous game." "I'm not the same person who ran out of that baby shower 2 years ago," I told him, my voice firm. "They don't have any power over me anymore. I'm not going there for a fight, I'm just going to watch." "All right," he said, a note of grim pride in his tone. "Then go, and remember who you are." Christmas Eve arrived. I stood in front of my closet, debating what to wear. My first instinct was to put on a power suit, something that screamed success. But that wasn't the right move. I wasn't there to show off. I was there to be a quiet observer. I chose a simple, elegant black dress. It was understated, but beautifully made, the kind of quality that is felt rather than seen. It was the armor of a woman who is so confident in her own power that she doesn't need to announce it. As I drove to their house, the familiar route felt different. The streets were the same, but I was not. The old feelings of anxiety and dread were gone, replaced by a cold, steady calm. I was a queen returning to a territory she had already conquered. The house was ablaze with lights, a perfect picture postcard of holiday cheer. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with forced gaiety. My father greeted me at the door. He looked older, more stooped than I remembered. His smile was a pained grimace. "Sloane, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, his voice hollow. My mother, Meredith, swept over, a glass of champagne in her hand. She was dressed in a glittering gold dress, a queen presiding over a crumbling kingdom. She gave my black dress a quick, dismissive glance. "How simple," she remarked, before turning her attention to a wealthier-looking guest. Paige and Chad were holding court by the fireplace. Paige's baby was now a toddler, who was being cared for by a nanny somewhere out of sight. They descended on me like vultures. "Sloane," Chad boomed, clapping me on the shoulder a little too hard. "Still running that little gift basket thing? Good for you, keeping busy." "It's called Keepsake Co., Paige corrected him, her voice dripping with condescension. "I saw one of your boxes at a friend's house. It was cute." I just smiled, a calm, serene smile that I knew would infuriate them. "I'm glad you think so," I said, my voice even. "We're doing quite well." I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. My calm threw them off. They were expecting the nervous, apologetic Sloane. They didn't know what to do with this version of me. I took a glass of water and found a quiet spot to stand and watch. And then I saw her. Over by the dining room, directing her staff with her usual quiet competence, was Mrs. Gable, the caterer. The same caterer from the baby shower. Our eyes met across the crowded room. She gave me a small nod of recognition, a flicker of a question in her professional gaze. I nodded back. The jury was now present. Dinner was an exercise in denial. My parents and Paige and Chad kept up a constant stream of chatter about Chad's latest promotion, a planned ski trip to Aspen, the new car they were thinking of buying. It was a performance, a desperate attempt to project an image of wealth and stability that I knew was a complete lie. I sat in silence, eating my food, a quiet observer at the theater of their desperation. And then, it happened. In the middle of a story, Chad was telling about his golf handicap. My mother's phone, sitting on the table beside her plate, buzzed. She glanced at it, annoyed at the interruption. Then it buzzed again, a persistent, insistent vibration. It was a call from a number she didn't recognize. With an exasperated sigh, she answered it, hitting the speakerphone button out of habit, so she wouldn't have to hold it to her ear. "Hello?" she said, her voice sharp. A man's professional voice came through the small speaker, clear as a bell in the sudden lull in conversation. "Good evening. Am I speaking with Mrs. Meredith Holloway?" "Yes. Who is this?" "Mrs. Holloway, my name is John from the Asset Management Department at Premier National Bank. I do apologize for calling on Christmas Eve, but we're calling to confirm a rather large and unusual transaction on your mortgage account." The entire table froze. I saw my father's hand, which was lifting a wineglass to his lips, stop mid-air. The blood drained from his face. He turned a ghastly shade of white. Meredith let out a brittle laugh. "There must be a mistake. We haven't made a payment. You should know that better than anyone." Her voice was laced with a nervous defiance. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The banker's voice, when it came back, was calm and factual. "Ma'am, I can assure you there is no mistake. A wire transfer for the full outstanding balance of your primary and secondary mortgages was processed about an hour ago. The total amount was $785,420.63. Your mortgage has been paid in full." Silence. A complete, deafening, soul-crushing silence descended on the dining room. You could have heard a pin drop. Paige's jaw had literally dropped open, her fork clattering onto her plate. Chad looked like he had been punched in the gut, his smug expression replaced by one of slack-jawed disbelief. My father was staring at his plate as if it held the secrets to the universe, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. Meredith's voice, when she finally found it, was a raw, shaking whisper. "Paid? Paid by who? This is impossible. Who would do that?" And then came the final, beautiful, devastating blow. "The transfer was initiated by a holding company, ma'am," the banker said. his voice still maddeningly professional. It's called the Keepsake Corporation. The transfer was authorized by the company's sole owner and founder, Ms. Sloane Holloway. Every head at the table swiveled to look at me. It was a slow, synchronized movement, like something out of a horror movie. I watched as my mother's face crumbled. It happened in stages. First, blank confusion, then dawning comprehension, then a wave of absolute soul-shattering horror and humiliation. Her carefully constructed world, her entire identity, had just been vaporized by the daughter she had dismissed as a useless failure. I saw Mrs. Gable, standing by the sideboard, her work forgotten. Her hand was pressed to her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and what looked like dawning, triumphant understanding. She was the witness. She had seen the beginning, and now she was seeing the end. I calmly placed my linen napkin on the table beside my plate. I stood up. The scraping of my chair sounded like a gunshot in the silent room. I looked directly at my mother, whose face was now ashen. "Merry Christmas, Mom," I said, my voice even, steady, and devoid of any emotion except a profound, unshakable calm. "I hope you like this gift better." I turned and walked away. I walked out of the dining room, through the grand foyer, and out the front door. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I left them there, sitting in the ruins of a world they had built on lies, a world now owned, lock, stock, and barrel, by the nobody they had thrown away. Months have passed since that Christmas Eve. I am standing in the headquarters of Keepsake Co. It's a bright, sprawling loft space with huge windows that overlook the city. The morning sun streams in, illuminating the cheerful buzz of my employees packing boxes, answering phones, and designing new product lines. It is a place of creation, of purpose, of joy. It is the empire I built. Julian is standing next to me, a rare, genuine smile on his face. We've just gotten off a conference call, finalizing a deal for our European expansion. "You built a legacy, kid," he says, clapping me on the shoulder. His pride is a quiet, steady warmth. It's the only approval I ever really needed. I haven't spoken to my family since that night. The silence has been profound. My father left one long, rambling, incoherent voicemail on my phone a few days later. It was a pathetic mix of apologies, justifications, and pleas. I listened to it once, then deleted it. My mother and sister have been completely silent. I imagine their humiliation is too great to allow them to reach out. I don't know if they still live in the house. I don't care. The house itself is just an asset on a corporate spreadsheet now, managed by my financial team. I have no desire to set foot in it again. I have no desire to evict them. Their punishment is not homelessness. It is the knowledge, every single day, that they are living under a roof, held up by the daughter they so thoroughly despised. Their prison is their own pride. The victory, I've come to realize, was never about the money. It wasn't about the power, or the house, or even the look on their faces in that final moment. That was just the punctuation at the end of the sentence. The true victory was in the journey. It was in the lonely nights, the instant noodles, the moment I rebuilt my crashed website with my own two hands. It was about taking back my own story, word by word, and writing a new ending for myself. It was about building a life so full, and a purpose so strong, that their judgment, their laughter, their disdain, simply became irrelevant noise. It no longer has the power to hurt me. I look out at the skyline, at the sprawling city that is now my home, my playground, my future. The chill I used to feel, the sense of being small and out of place, is gone. It has been replaced by a deep, quiet, and unshakable sense of peace. And for the first time in my entire life, I feel truly, completely free. This story is a reminder that your value is never determined by the people who refuse to see it. True strength comes from building your own definition of success, brick by brick, even when no one is watching. Have you ever had a moment where you had to prove your worth to people who should have believed in you all along? How did you handle it? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about overcoming the odds. Your support means the world. Thanks for listening. See you in the next one.